Hello, and this is my review video for round 5 and suggestions for round 6. So let's start with suggestions for round 6. First thing you should do is review your overview points for round 5. So I'm currently in round 6, but these are the results looking at my year-over-year change from year 4 to year 5. And I see that I was able to significantly increase by 12% my profit margins and by 27% my operational profit margins and my net profit margins. For operational profit margins, I looked a lot more closely at my advertising budget and tried to not overspend in the advertising area, which I had done in the previous round. Now, my sales went up by 49%. And once my sales go up, my profits go up, that cascades into a lot of my other variables that deal with profits and return on assets. And since I didn't purchase that many additional assets, I did better on my return on assets this round and my total asset turnover. And typically in rounds 5 and 6, you do better than the area. I had a slight improvement on my truck, so my forecasts were good. In the forecast area, I'm just trying not to lose points. And I had a cash surplus, which gave me 627 points for round 5. So now moving into round 6, of course, as always, I review my assessment. I see that my revenues are on the lower side, which I expected because my cars aren't the best. I'm trying to make cars that are more profitable than make cars that will sell the most. Then I will review my charts, with the performance charts being the most important. So when I look at it, I see a nice increase in my sales here. I see a nice increase in my net profits with a big jump from 3 to 4, it wasn't that much of an increase, but from 4 to 5, I had a big increase. And same thing with my profits versus sales. My sales went up nicely, and so did my profits. These are the yellow line is the profits, of course. The blue is the sales. And then if I look at my stock price, moved up nicely from 80 to 140, and my earnings per share peaked from 13 to 25. Okay, and then my points had a tough year 3 because of my unexpected deficit, but I was able to do better in year 4 and in year 5. Okay. Now, most importantly, when I look at my market potential, I see that I came close, but I gave up 300 cars here. I only forecasted 7,000. I could have sold another 200 here, and I could have sold another 200 here. So I'm about, and another 400 here. So I got to keep that in mind when I do my forecasting for my next round. I was a little conservative. And of course, I should check out the industry and see what some of the better teams have done and what their uh, gross profits are and what their uh, market potential is. And I see, on my overview, I left off an average of 74% gross profit. So when I design my vehicles this round, I want to make sure that I'm going to beat that amount. So let's see. Okay, so this car is at 84, which is good. And I'm going to, remember that I could have sold 53. And this goes up. I'm going to jump this up. If I sold 53, I think I can do 65 this round. And it's hard, a sedan, sedan, I want to really get above 74. So let's see where I get here. 68, still kind of low. Okay, 70. Yeah, let's see if I can make that up on, what did I do? I could have sold 72. I'm going to jump that up to maybe 89. I'm not sure. See how my truck does. 70. We can do all right, so let's see. So like most of you, I'm having a hard time getting to the profit margins that I want to get my score up. All right, so it looks like I left off in the overview at 74, and only my economy is really getting above that. So I'm gonna have to make some sacrifices here. I don't think I can. It's going to hurt my last round because I'm going to have a hard time really getting above that 74. $72, $70. Yep, so for truck, I'm not going to even this one. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to really be able to. I'm going to probably just be only, I think I could average out maybe a 76%, a small percentage of my gross profit, which is disappointing. I wanted to get much higher than that. Okay, so I'm going to move into my marketing. And again, in marketing, I don't do this on screen because it takes a long time. But what I'm trying to do here is look at what the range is for the industry and then trying to figure out what's the, based on my cars, how many cars I think I'm going to sell, and come up with a reasonable budget from advertising where I don't waste a lot of money here, but yet I advertise enough to stay competitive. It's tricky. And I would use the practice round as an area to test your ideas about advertising. Do a practice round where you over advertise, do one where you under advertise, and see what the effect is. So you really have to do, we're lucky we have these practice rounds where you can do some trial and error because it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen here. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to have to buy some new production plants here. And this is going to hurt my overall return on assets a little bit if I can't really meet these sales goals. And my capacity utilization, which is something that I hope that you understand after reading this reflective observation down here about capacity utilization, is going to be lower because I'm not going to be able to make to the full use of my factories. 7, 5, 9, and 7, I'm coming hundreds of cars short, so that can affect my return on assets as well. I can't make any more additional operational investments here, so I'm going to just leave that alone and move into my finance page. So on the finance page, I see that I have a surplus of 543 million, which is very nice. So I'm going to pay the maximum down on my balances for each of my areas here. I think 50% is the max I can retire. And that's, that's not uncommon in the business world that when you take certain debt or loans or equity, there's a minimum of what you can retire. You can't retire the full amount. There may be a clause saying that you'll be penalized if you retire too early. So investors want to have a guarantee that there's only so much you can retire at a certain point. So it's not unrealistic that you can't retire the full amount. Okay, so let me process the round and see what points I get. Okay. All right, so for the last year, I got 358 points. So that is below the 400 I was shooting for. And like I said, I wasn't able to get my gross profit margin above my 74. So that's a fail on my side. But I did move up my net, and my total asset turnover improved, and my total return on assets, which I was worried about, those did improve. So I did improve in a lot of areas. My forecast wasn't as good. I think I over forecasted on economy and truck, so I lost just a little bit of points there, but I didn't have a deficit. So I got 358 points. So let's look at, let's see, what is this class ranking here? Okay, so For the total game, I've got 2,852 points, which is above the 2,600 needed to get an A for this project. So I made my goal of 2,600, and I had some extra points earned from previous rounds to make sure I went over the 2,600. The stock price came in good, and I single-handedly beat Computer Player 1 and Computer Player 2. So I would say that's a pretty good showing here. Now, if we go back to the class, okay, here I'm in the results for the class for year 5. So I've just given you some ideas and some problems and concepts that you're going to face in year 6. It's really critical that, in my year 6, I was able to not necessarily improve my net profit margin because it was very hard for me to get my gross profit margins very high, but I was able to get my operational and my net profit margin higher by more focusing tightly on my marketing budget and reducing that where I could and not sacrificing too many sales. So there's a give and take in this game when you're trying to do things just like in a regular company. But if we look at let's look at the leaderboard for year 5. I have a number of companies that scored easily over, look at all these companies that are over 500 points for year 5. And that's close to or above the 90 percentile rank. So you did better than, a lot of my students did better than the previous 5,000 teams that played the simulation. So people in this class are doing very well, at least the top third of the class. And then there's a lot of teams that got close to the 300-400 mark, which is what they're shooting for. But there's still some teams that were below, say 350, below 372 points. You're now in the bottom half of performance. And a lot of that has to do with profit margins. So the profit margins are 70, anything above 60%, I think, is doing very well for round 5. And there's still a lot of teams below 60% that need to work on their profit margins. And remember, we started at 40%. So if you're one of these teams that are below 40% or around 40%, anything from 45% and below, you're really not trying as hard as you should in the simulation, because you're not getting the basic concept that you have to increase your profit margins, increase prices, reduce costs, invest in your operational efficiencies. That's what I've been saying every video since the beginning of the semester. And some teams are still having a hard time with that concept. And you can see in stock price, we have a range from all the way from 169 all the way down to $28, reflecting the performance that teams are having in the simulation. So let's just go to total points. So total points, I have a number of teams here. I have, I'm going to count this team here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams already over the 2,600 points. And I have another probably 10 or 15 teams over 2,100 points. So the majority of the class is over 2,100 points. Means they're on track, and you just need to get that last 400 points in the last round to get the full grade for this. The bottom third of the class is going to have to really pull out a miracle round to get 500, 600, 700 points to get to the full score of the simulation. So keep in mind how many points you're trying to earn. And it's for some teams it's difficult. Now I have some teams that are really working hard on this, that are doing a lot of practice rounds. As one team in general, what they do is each year there's 4 team members. Each team member runs the practice round for the year they're working. I say it was year 5. The team member who gets the highest points for year 5 is the leader for that year, and then they coordinate, work together to complete the year. They also constructed a spreadsheet to input the pro forma financial statement information, so they can kind of predict what points that they'll generate based on the sales and profits that their pro forma financial statements are telling them. So they're putting a lot of effort into making sure. And this team, I can tell you, is already above 2,600. So their tactics works. Other teams, I talked to a couple teams I talked to that were doing poorly, and I asked them, how are you working? What were you doing? And they said, well, we just, to be honest, we're busy, so we just divided up the functions, and each team member is responsible for completing one page. So, and then the last person submits it. So I said, well, you don't work together and coordinate. You don't kind of discuss what marketing is doing compared to what finance is doing, and what sales is trying to do compared to what production needs to do. No, we don't have time to meet. We just each do our part and then we submit it. I said, well, can you imagine a company where the VP of finance didn't talk to the VP of sales or marketing or operations, and they ran a company by never communicating to each other and just kind of making the best guess of what the other people were thinking? No, that wouldn't work in real world, and it's not working in the simulation. So they agreed it was a fail, and they're going to try and meet and work together to rectify that and work as a team. I just hope it's not too late. As we can see here, as we look at net profits, we can see that there's a nice increase in net profits. In year 5, we had a banner year of net profits with 2 teams making over $300 million in net profits. And then if we look at points, points are getting a little, points rebounded, average points rebounded from year 3, average points were closer to 400. In year 5, average points were more closer to 500. So points have been rebounding here. And most teams have been doing pretty well. If we look at stock price, like I said, we have 2 companies here over $160 in stock price, and a number of companies under $100 in stock price. And this directly reflects the amount of earnings per share, your sales revenue growth, and your net profit margins. That's what investors are looking at. Companies that disappoint don't have as much increase in their stock price. So stock price is a good indicator there. Sales per team, we have anywhere, some teams are selling close to $1 billion of sales, and some teams are down here with less than 500 million. So how are some teams close to $1 billion while other teams are still at the 500 million mark? It's all about really putting the effort into the simulation and knowing your forecast, testing your forecast out in the practice rounds, and paying close attention to what's happened in previous rounds, looking at the growth rates. So some teams are pretty good at forecasting their sales, and other teams are not as good. So earnings per share, we have a clear winner this round, $29 for Supergate Autos. Their earnings per share is the best this round, and it was, the best last round. So they're good with their earnings per share. Other companies are pretty close at 25, and there's some companies still at under $10. Why are you under $10? Your gross profits are not high. Your revenues are disappointing. Your net profits are disappointing. Investors are just not really enthusiastic. And we all had the same opportunity starting back here, as far as the same exact starting point in industry and growth model of the industry cars. And some companies just got the maximum efficiency out of that, and some companies are still struggling. So it's a lot like the real world, where we see the same exact thing happening for a lot of companies competing in the same space. Even the auto companies, we have some auto companies just killing it on the top of profits and stock price, and some auto companies really struggling. So very interesting results, and I'm really happy with the simulation because it really gives you, the student, the opportunity to understand what financially running a company is all about, how the different departments of a company work together, how, we spent a lot of time in class looking at the financial ratios, analyzing financial statements, looking at risk and return. Coming up, we're going to be talking about capital structure and capital budget that I'm going to relate back to the simulation. So this is one way that I'm trying to give you some connection to the material we're talking about. Because if I just talk about financial concepts and you have no application, you never worked for a company in a financial role or managed a simulation in a financial role, it's really difficult to understand why financial ratios are important, or understanding cash flows or financial statements are important, or the concept of borrowing money, issuing stock, retiring stock, the concepts of profit margins, increasing profit margins, what investors are looking for. It's really clear cut in the simulation. It helps me do a good job of explaining it and tying it into your learning in the classroom. So this is our final video on the simulation. I wish you the best of luck on round 6, and hopefully you can make the 2,600 points to get the full score for the project. And remember to complete your reflective observations. I am checking those, and points will be taken off if they're not completed. And good luck. I'll talk to you soon.